In this video we're going to get started by creating a main menu. Now when it comes to the Flash side of this, to be honest with you, the only thing that's really been done on Flash's side is just the little fun stuff that you can do to make your movie clips look like buttons and kind of make them bevel out and things like that. So there isn't any coding like there was in the previous one going into this main menu. Now that's not to say there won't be later, but right now there won't be any coding that needs to be flip-flop back and forth um, to the point where we were doing it before with the HUD. To get started, we have class PuzGFX main menu movie, and that extends GFX movie player. We have variable GFX click widget, and we basically set a couple variables here. We have a new game button, load game button, exit game button, and high scores button. And then we have a function initialize like we did before, and then we just do a start and advance to 0. GFX click widgets are just like you would think. They're widgets that you click, that you press the button down on, and that allows us to create these event listeners that when the button's clicked, we can then use Unrealscript code to do something that we want for the game, such as if you click new game, you load its first level, things like that. Then we go inside of an event bool called widget initialize. This is originally created inside of our GFX movie player, but it's never really put to use. It's kind of sitting there, even though there's some most likely native code that puts it to use. So I can't really explain how it gets called and when it does, but I will say that it does get called. And in there, you just do a switch widget name, and we have a case for each one of these buttons. Now notice that we're using lowercase now. It's not pointing to these buttons in particular until here. The case is actually pointing to what the name of it is inside of the Flash game. Now down at the bottom here in default properties, we add these widgets this way, and then what happens is through the event it gets called, and then we set that case, that movie clip, to each one of these widgets this way, as opposed to like before where we did like a underscore root kind of thing. So down here we have obviously movie info that points to the movie that we have in our content pack, and then we have widget bindings dot add, and then we do widget name, and that name of course is the name that exists inside of the Flash movie, and then we have widget class equals GFX click widget, because that's what it is, and then we basically set all four of those to that. Back up here, what happens is then it goes through this. The event most likely calls each time, and then it looks through each case, and then it finds it, and then it assigns the click widget up here to each one of these, and that allows us then to use new game button to point to that click widget for when it's pressed. Then what we do is like I said, we set that to that widget, and then what we do is we create an event listener. Now, if you're not familiar with Flash, or other programming languages that use this, what basically happens is this allows when the button is pressed, for instance, click underscore press is like kind of like the code to say when it's pressed. Then what happens is it calls on this function, and the function's called on new game button pressed, and then we created kind of the same thing for the rest, on load game and on high scores and on exit button pressed, and then we need to create that function down here as well. Now down here we have function on new game button pressed, and what it does is it passes in the event data, which even though it says GFX click widget dot event data, EV is actually the variable that we would use, the parameter. This is not the parameter that we would use. So if you needed to for some reason point to this click widget, you could using EV. Now we probably won't have to do that, but now inside of on new game button pressed, we do a console command where we just open test level 4. Later we're going to probably change this to when we actually start using the main levels and you move our way up. But for right now we'll leave it at test level 4. We have function on game button pressed, and we just use a log on this one, loading button pressed. And eventually this will have code, and so will high scores button pressed will have code. But for right now we're not going to touch that yet because that's going to be more in depth. And then finally we have an on exit button pressed, and what that basically does is it just exits out of the game. So if you wanted, you can now exit out of the game without having to scroll up to the X button, or have to hit Alt Tab or something, whatever you had to do before, go in console and hit exit yourself. Now you just hit the exit button and you leave the game yourself that way. Now of course this is only for the main menu though. This isn't for when you actually load the game. Now when you click on the new game button pressed, it will load test level 4, and then you'll be done with the main menu at that point. You can't get back to it. That doesn't mean that we won't later make that possible, but for right now, you can't get back to it. Now that we have that done, we need to make sure it loads. So in order to load it, there's two things we need to do. First, we need to go inside of our Puzz player controller, and what we're going to do is we created a map called main menu, and this main menu is what's going to be our kind of like our trigger, so to speak, of when we should load this movie. A lot of people, what they'll do is, and even UDK front end, what they do is they use Kismet to load their main menu. This is an Unrealscript based, class, so I wanted to make sure that you saw everything being done through Unrealscript, not through Kismet or other kind of ways around doing things. So I wanted to give you straightforward here. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the Puzz player controller load this main menu, and it's going to load it if the map name is equal to main menu. So we're still going to use a separate map, even though it's really just a square, a hollow square where a person's player starts in there and there's just a light, and that's all there is to it. Um, that's what we're going to use as a trigger. So what we're going to then do is we're going to get the map name, and if the map name does equal main menu, we're going to create the start menu. We go up to create start menu, and what we do is we grab two variables here. We have start menu class and start menu. Start menu class, of course, holds the class of the movie, which is set down default properties here. We have start menu class equals puzzlegame.puzzgfx main menu movie, which is what we just created. And then we have also a puzzgfx main menu movie, which is called start menu. That actually holds the instance. The class, like normal, is used usually to spawn the instance. This is used to hold the instance. So start menu will equal that new version. Now we don't spawn it, we actually create a new version because it's more of an object, not really something we create like a creature in the game. Spawning usually used for actors. And then we have start menu.set timing mode tm_real. We've discussed this before. That just makes sure if there's some sort of transition between levels that it doesn't cause any issues. It hangs around. You might not even really need that there, to be honest. And then we have start menu.initialize, which we went back to it. It initializes it by starting the menu. This will work right now if you were to start it up and say, okay, let's give it a go. However, there's one problem. We have a HUD still, and the HUD's going to get in the way. So we want to make sure we turn off that HUD. So what we do is we go into a function called generic player initialization. This gets called from inside of post login. And what we're going to do is when it hits this, we're going to say if the map name is equal to main menu, HUD type is going to equal to class UDK HUD. So we're just going to kind of not use our HUD. We're just going to use the base HUD, which really isn't a HUD at all anyway. So nothing's going to pop up. Now, if for some reason in the future UDK HUD actually does hold something, you're probably going to want to move this maybe to HUD or maybe even to none. But for right now, this works fine. And then we obviously want to keep the code that was in there before by using super.generic player initialization. Now if you run it, the HUD shouldn't pop up. You want to make sure obviously the map that you're running is called main menu. But we're not done yet, because now that we have a menu, we no longer need front end. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our config files and make a few changes. We start by going into our default engine, and we'll also be going into our default engine UDK. Now if you forgot where your config files are located, you go into UDK, into the version you have, under UDK game, and then under config, and those are your INIs. Never delete default INIs. Now the UDK versions you can. And the reason why you can is because they get recreated every time you recompile code, start the game, whatever. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by going inside of our default engine. And inside of our default engine INI, you want to go under the URL column and change map to equal mainmenu.udk and local map to equal mainmenu.udk. And what that's going to do is that's going to overwrite front end. So we're not going to when we start the game, it won't load the front end anymore. Also, we need to go into default engine UDK, and under URL, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to change map to mainmenu.udk and local map to equal mainmenu.udk. With those two in place, you can delete the UDK engine, and that way it gets recreated. And now if you recompile the game or run the game or whatever you decide to do, now it will actually load from Unreal front end. So to give you an idea, what you can do is you can actually, from Unreal front end, you can actually launch the game from that now. However, there's some bugs still with UDK at the moment, and one of the bugs is it doesn't actually bring your content packs over. It does bring your maps over, but it won't bring your content packs over. So if you want to actually run the game from launch, you're going to have to do a few more things. Now I will say you can run the game from your udk.exe file, which I'm not really sure that why the two aren't connected in this way, but they're not. So if you were to go into your UDK properties like we did before inside of your exe file, you could actually delete pretty much all of this now. You may want to leave the log, and then just from udk.exe you can delete everything to the right of that, the test level 4, everything like that, and then leave the log there. And what that will do is when you double click on it, it'll load the main menu now, because we set that up to load the main menu as the main map. Now, and then when you hit new game, it'll load the test level 4. Of course, obviously, you're probably not going to want to have to go through the main menu every single time you want to test your map out, so I suggest you don't delete this, or at least if you want to test it out, you're more than welcome to, but put the stuff back in there when you're done. Now, to get back to making the launch button work, what we're going to do is we have to go into our UDK game file, and what we do is we go into content and we find class content. And inside of class content, we're going to basically copy this folder, this UPK folder, with everything in it, and we're going to put it inside of our cooked PC folder, which is located in UDK game also. And by placing that into the UDK folder, as you can see, I didn't copy the folder, I just copied the UPKs, but you could put the folder in here with the UPKs in it. It won't cause any difference. By doing that, that will allow this to be transferred over. Now, before you do that, or if you've, if you might have already done this, you want to make sure you add your maps here as well, and you want to cook it. Now, if you moved your UPKs over, make sure, of course, you copy it, because you don't want to you want to keep your own over in the original area. Just copy and paste. You can just do cook packages. If you want to, you can do a clean and full recook, but if you do that, then you want to move the UPKs back over there, because it'll delete everything inside that cooked PC folder when you start. So then when you're done that, then you can click launch, and it should launch without any problems. You may see a few errors because it's probably pointing at the fact that we're not using front end anymore, but that's nothing to worry about.